A cozy afternoon at the Healer house, and Bluey and Bingo are playing in the backyard when a mysterious old man approaches the fence. He's dressed in a patchwork coat with a kind smile and a bag full of colorful toys. "Hello, little ones. I'm Jason, the Toymaker. Would you like a special doll made just for you?" he says in a gentle melodic voice. Bluey, excited by the idea, nods eagerly and Jason hands them two exquisite dolls. One blue like Bluey, the other pink like Bingo, with lifelike eyes that seem to sparkle. "Take good care of them and they'll take care of you," he whispers before vanishing down the street. The sisters bring the dolls inside and start playing, naming them Mini-Me and Tiny Sis. At first, it's fun. The dolls feel warm to the touch and their eyes follow the girls' movements, almost as if listening. But as the day turns to evening, strange things happen. Bluey notices her doll mimicking her actions perfectly. When she jumps, the doll hops slightly on the table. Bingo feels a tug on her paw like an invisible string pulling her toward the toy. "It's like they're alive," laughs Bluey. But Bingo senses something off, a faint whisper from the dolls. "Play with us forever." Night falls and the nightmare unfolds. The dolls begin to move on their own, their tiny limbs creaking as they climb down from the shelf. Bluey's doll whispers secrets only she knows, like her hidden fears, while Bingo's pulls at her with unseen threads, making her dance unwillingly. The room fills with the sound of faint music box tunes, and the sisters feel their bodies stiffening, joints locking like wood. Jason's voice echoes from the dolls. "You're my perfect creations now. Join the collection." Shadows in the room stretch into strings, wrapping around Bluey and Bingo, turning their movements jerky and puppet-like. Bandit and Chili hear the commotion and rush in, seeing the dolls controlling their daughters. Panic rises as the Toymaker's influence spreads. The parents feel tugs too, their limbs heavy. Bluey, fighting the pull, remembers Jason's words and realizes the dolls are linked to him. With Bingo's help, they smash the toys against the floor, breaking the porcelain and severing the strings. A final whisper fades. "You'll always be mine." The family hugs tightly, relieved as the strange pull vanishes. They decide to stick closer together, turning the experience into a lesson about trusting strangers. From then on, their games feel even more special, strengthened by the bond they share. The morning began quietly. Mom was making breakfast. Bluey and Bingo played in their room. Dad stood by the window, unmoving. He didn't respond when Mom called him, he just stared outside. The street was silent, still. When Bluey peeked through the curtain, she saw their neighbor Wendy walking slowly down the road. Her steps were stiff, mechanical. Her eyes were open but empty. Behind her came more figures, moving the same way. Mom calmly lowered the blinds and locked the front door. She didn't explain, just said, "Stay inside." Dad sat in his chair, silent, unblinking. He didn't speak again. Bluey, unaware of what was happening, came up with a new game. Infection. In her game, one person becomes a zombie and tries to tag the others. Bingo hesitated. She didn't want to play. Bluey laughed and started creeping around the house with her arms outstretched. The game stopped when Dad stood up. His movement was sudden, unnatural. He turned toward them, no words, no expression. His footsteps were slow, heavy. And then he reached forward. Bluey and Bingo screamed and ran, slamming the door to the storage room behind them. Outside, footsteps, measured, repeating, no voice, no sound. They waited. Time passed. They couldn't tell how long. The air was heavy, still. Bluey found an old flashlight. She remembered a game where zombies were afraid of light. Together they opened the door and stepped out. The house was gray, quiet. Dad stood in the hallway with his back to them, motionless. Bluey turned on the flashlight. The beam hit his shoulders. He jerked. He blinked, then slowly turned around. There was confusion in his eyes. He whispered, "Where am I?" He didn't remember anything. He looked tired. That's when Mum came in. She stepped inside quietly, calmly. Her voice was soft, her face was neutral, but something in her eyes felt off. "Everything's okay," she said. "Let's go sit in the lounge." Dad didn't move, he just stared at her. From the window they could see more shapes moving down the street. Dozens, maybe more. Bingo took Mum's paw. Bluey looked at Dad. He was frozen in place. Silence, then a faint sound. A soft thump. The storage room door, the one they had just come from. It moved. The screen slowly fades to black. The last sound, a single careful step. Then nothing. It was a typical rainy day at the Gila house. The rain drummed against the roof, keeping Bluey and Bingo from playing outside. Bingo sat drawing in her room while a bored Bluey wandered through the house. Suddenly, she stopped in the middle of the living room. From beneath the old wooden floorboards covered by a rug came a faint scratching sound. Bluey knelt down and listened closely. The sound came again, this time with a soft tapping, as if someone was gently scratching the wood from inside. "Hello," Bluey whispered. In response, a barely audible but distinct whisper echoed back, seemingly from the very depths of the house. The words were unintelligible, but the tone was soft and comforting. Bluey smiled. She had a new friend. She began spending more and more time on the floor, pressing her ear to the boards. Her parents noticed. "What are you playing, Bluey?" Chili would ask, seeing her daughter whisper to an unseen companion. "I'm playing with my friend under the floor," Bluey would happily reply. Bandit and Chili exchanged glances but chalked it up to childish imagination, glad that Bluey had found something to occupy herself. As the days passed, Bluey's behavior grew stranger. She stopped paying attention to Bingo, ignored calls for dinner, at times even refusing her favorite games. Her entire world narrowed to her conversations with the friend under the floor. She'd whisper secrets to it, laugh at its very funny jokes, as she called them, even though Bandit and Chili heard nothing. At night, Chili began hearing strange sounds, quiet, persistent rustles, creaks, and taps coming from beneath the floor of the children's room. Sometimes she thought she could faintly hear a dry, hushed chuckle that chilled her to the bone. She mentioned it to Bandit, but he assured her it was just an old house or her own tiredness. One day, Bandit found Bluey trying to pull up the edge of the rug in the living room. Her little paws frantically clawed at the edges. "What are you doing, sweetie?" he asked. Bluey turned around. Her eyes, usually full of mischievous sparkle, were cloudy and vacant. "My friend wants to come out and play," she whispered, her smile strangely forced. A chill ran down Bandit's spine. He led Bluey away from the rug. Later that night, when everyone was asleep, Bandit quietly went to the spot where Bluey had spent so much time. He carefully lifted a corner of the rug. Beneath it were old, darkened floorboards, nothing out of the ordinary. But as he leaned closer, he felt an icy draft, smelling of dampness and something putrid. And then he heard it, a quiet, raspy whisper coming from somewhere beneath the house. It wasn't Bluey's voice, and it wasn't comforting. It was filled with malice and hunger. Bandit immediately dropped the rug, his heart pounding. The next morning, Bluey was quiet, almost silent. She wasn't running or jumping. She just sat on the floor, her ear pressed to the boards, humming a faint, unfamiliar tune. When Chili called her for breakfast, Bluey didn't stir. Bandit approached to pick her up, but when he touched her shoulder, Bluey jolted sharply and looked back. Her eyes were completely black, devoid of pupils, and they reflected a grotesque, predatory grin that twisted her snout. "He's very hungry," a voice rasped, utterly unlike Bluey's. Chili screamed. The camera slowly pulls away from Bluey, lying on the floor as she continues to hum monotonously. From beneath the floor, a louder wet scratching grows, punctuated by slurping sounds that echo throughout the Healer house. The sounds grow in intensity, then abruptly cease. Darkness enveloped the house for just a few seconds, then slow, heavy footsteps echoed from deep within, climbing the stairs. Bluey grabbed Bingo's paw tightly and pushed the bedroom window, but it was locked. The footsteps stopped right at their door and an ominous silence fell. Then the door handle slowly turned. Bluey found the window key, but her hands were shaking so much that the key slipped and fell to the floor. The door opened, revealing Bandit and Chili standing completely motionless with empty, lifeless eyes. They looked at the girls but seemed not to see them at all. Bluey picked up the key and opened the window just as their zombie parents began moving toward them with slow mechanical movements. The sisters climbed onto the roof and descended via the drain pipe. Looking back, they saw two dark figures in the bedroom window, silently watching them from above. They ran to the neighboring house. Wendy's kitchen light was on, and when Bluey peered through the window, she saw Wendy standing motionless by the stove, not cooking, just staring at the wall with an empty gaze. Her husband sat at the table in the same unnatural pose, while their son stood in the corner with arms hanging like a doll's. All had the same empty eyes. Bluey stepped back and they ran down the street where every house glowed with windows containing motionless figures. The entire neighborhood was infected. At a streetlight, Bluey pulled out her phone. 1% battery remaining. People began emerging from houses, moving slowly toward the girls. "Where do we go?" Bingo whispered. Bluey remembered the abandoned house at the end of the street. They ran there. The door was open and inside it smelled of dust. Bluey found old candles and lit one. Soft light filled the room. "We're safe here," she whispered, but Bingo froze at the window. Outside, dozens of figures were gathering, neighbors and familiar faces standing around the house in silence, watching the windows and waiting. Something creaked in the darkness. Floorboards upstairs. "Who is it?" Bingo whispered. The house had been abandoned for years. Footsteps slowly descended the stairs as the candle flickered. A figure emerged from the corridor, an old man, the house's former owner. He had died last winter, yet stood there with empty eyes. His clothes were dirty and old, as if he'd been lying in the ground for a long time. Bluey realized the horrifying truth. The infection raised not only the living but the dead. The old man began moving toward them and the candle went out. Darkness. Bluey lit a new candle. The old man stood a meter away, reaching forward. She grabbed Bingo and ran to the back door, locked. The window was boarded up. They were trapped. The old man stood at the edge of the light as if afraid to enter the illuminated zone. Outside, the crowd waited silently. Bluey looked at the remaining candles. Only 2 left. "What happens in the morning?" Bingo whispered. Bluey didn't answer. She wasn't sure morning would come at all. The second candle flickered and something stirred in the darkness behind them. New figures were rising from the basement. To be continued. There's a Lost Bluey episode. Whispers call it Not Her Voice. It's one of those episodes you never find listed. Only mentioned by those who watched late at night, when they shouldn't have. It started on a normal evening. Bluey and Bingo were getting ready for bed. Their parents tucked them in. Bandit said goodnight. Chili kissed their foreheads. The lights turned off. Soft footsteps faded down the hallway. Bluey lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the soft sounds of the night. Then she heard it. Her mother's voice. "Bluey, come here, sweetie." Bluey smiled, half asleep. She slipped out of bed and padded down the hallway. The house was dark, colder than usual. The voice called again, closer now. "Bluey, I'm waiting." Bluey turned the corner toward the living room. But there, standing at the end of the hall, was Chili, smiling, calm, holding a cup of tea. "What are you doing up, honey?" Bluey froze. The voice had come from the opposite direction, still calling her name, software urgent, wrong. Bluey looked back. The hallway behind her stretched longer than it should have. At the far end, the outline of her mother stood, but not quite right. The shoulders too slumped, the neck too stiff, the head tilted in an unnatural way. "Bluey, come here." The real Chili stepped forward. "Sweetheart, come to me, right now." Her voice shook just a little. Bluey didn't hesitate. She ran into Chili's arms. They turned together and hurried back to the bedroom. As Chili closed the door, Bluey heard it again. A slow, scraping sound. Nails dragging along the hallway walls. Scratching. Following. That night, Bluey slept in her parents' bed, sandwiched safely between Bandit and Chili. But long after the house went silent, she kept her eyes open, listening. Just before she drifted into uneasy sleep, she heard a whisper, right against the window pane. "You chose the wrong one." The final frame showed the hallway once more. Empty, silent. But if you watched closely and just for a second, the shadows seemed to move. Reaching, stretching, waiting. The screen faded to black. No credits, no music. Only the soft sound out of breathing, too close to the microphone.